Czechast, a podcast in English about Czech and Moravian society, history, culture and economy.
Hello and welcome to Czechast, the podcast in English about all things Czech. I'm Vít Pohanka, and today we're taking a closer look at something that's easy to reduce to a single headline, but much harder to understand properly. Corruption, or more precisely, how corruption is perceived in Czechia. Because this week brought news that, at first glance at least, sounds encouraging. According to the latest Corruption Perceptions Index published by the global corruption watchdog Transparency International, Czechia has moved up the rankings. After years of stagnation, the country climbed to 39th place worldwide, improving both its score and its position. So, good news? Well, partly yes, but also a reminder that context matters. Because Czechia is still well below the European Union average. Several countries that joined the European Union at the same time, including the Baltic states, continue to rank higher. And the debate at home quickly turned political, with sharply different interpretations of what this improvement actually means, and whether it reflects real systematic change or just a relative shift in a world where perceptions of corruption are worsening almost everywhere. And that global picture is important. The index shows declining trust not only in fragile states or war-torn countries, but also in long-established democracies from the United States to parts of Western Europe. In that sense, Czechia's result is happening against the backdrop of growing skepticism about institutions, political culture, and the rule of law far beyond Central Europe. So, what does this ranking really tell us about Czechia today? How much progress has actually been made? Where are the blind spots? And how should we read corruption rankings at a time when public trust is under pressure almost everywhere? To unpack all of that, I called the Czech chapter of Transparency International in Prague. I'm Vít Pohanka, and this is Czechast about corruption in Czechia.
Czechast, a podcast in English about all things Czech. Whether you're an English-speaking expat living in Czechia and Slovakia, or a descendant of the Czechs, Moravians and Slovaks who left for a better life in America, Australia, Britain or Canada so long ago that you don't speak the language of the old country, this podcast in English is for you.
My name is Marek Chromý. I'm chief analyst of Czech branch of Transparency International.
This is for international audiences. Could you briefly kind of set the scene, explain what the Corruption Perception Index is, what it means, how old it is, how long has it been being published?
Corruption Perception Index is basically the only one international index trying to, let's say, sort of measuring corruption, because measuring corruption per se is not possible, because there is actually no way how to do it. Whether we want to look into, for example, a number of investigated cases of corruption, this number would strongly vary among all the countries around the world. On the other hand, it doesn't measure the, let's say, the quality of the investigation. Thus, Transparency International does measure corruption perception. What does it mean? Transparency International is asking the experts around the world, economists, academics, journalists, or about their opinion on specific countries. How do they see whether they are corrupted or not corrupted, how the situation within the specific countries goes. Those experts bind it to well-known international organizations such as World Bank or Journalists Without Borders. Thus, it is not, let's say, vox populi research. It is research among professionals, among experts.
Excellent. Now, Czechia this year, as I read, scored 59 points, matching its best result from 2018. If we look at the long-term trends since the 1990s, how much progress has the country actually made in fighting corruption?
The progress is there. There is no doubt about that. What matters the most from our point of view is that the Czech Republic is still behind the average score among the countries from European Union. We are very slowly getting there, yet there is still a lot of work to do ahead of us.
I was just going to ask you, what do you think the report tells us, or the index tells us, about the causes, for the state of things where Czechia is kind of stuck in the middle?
Well, from what we do see from the data is that there is strong lack of, let's say, strategical approach on how to fight corruption. The most of laws adopted based on the, let's say, push from the European Union or other international organizations, and the will from Czech political representatives is strongly limited. We can see it on quite bright example of new legislation regarding lobbying, because I would say, or our organization would say that this law was adopted because Czech Republic needed to comply with the EU, and the adoption of the law prevented Czechia from losing billions Czech crowns from EU. It is national resilience plan, which we needed to follow. Technically speaking, we do have the law, so we can receive the money. On the other hand, the law was adopted with great reluctance. There is plenty of exceptions within the law, so we do feel like there is a lot of space for improving in this specific law, if we want to be specific and correct.
I don't want to surprise you too much, but if you were to explain to someone abroad what the position in this respect of Czechia is in Central European context, I mean, I don't want any kind of strict comparisons, but when we look at the neighboring countries, Poland, Slovakia, Austria, obviously Hungary, which is not bordering on Czech Republic, but is within the region, and Germany, how does Czechia stand in this kind of group of nations?
If we compare those states, I would split the neighboring states in two halves. On one side, we do have Slovakia and Poland, where we can see, let's put it mildly, stagnation of scorer. On the specific reasons why is that, I honestly cannot say, because I'm not an expert on Slovakia or Poland. On the other hand, let's say the second half of the neighboring countries is Germany and Austria, and those countries, I would say, constantly on among top 20 scorers within the CPI. And those are the countries where we need to look for inspiration on how to improve Czech fight with corruption among politicians, among top officials, and so on.
You mentioned Austria and Germany as the countries that Czechia could kind of learn from. But there are, of course, countries like Finland, Denmark, that are really the top scorers. Smaller nations, Scandinavian nations. I just wonder, could Czechia learn something from them too?
The biggest, let's say, comparison, the biggest gap we can actually see is what we do call a political culture. Among the top scorers within CPI, it is quite common among politicians, for example, if there is even slight suspicion of non-ethical or non-legal behavior connected to the specific politician, this politician do stop his all positions, all, let's say, public lives, until the suspicion of those allegations proved completely wrong. This sort of behavior and this sort of ethics we lacks in Czech Republic for a long time, and even the government of Mr. Fiala tried to persuade the public that, let's say, they answering the allegations completely and honestly and ethically compared to the for example Scandinavian states. These were nothing, and we still have so much to learn.
When you mentioned the government of Mr. Fiala, the previous government, there was a big scandal concerning bitcoins at the Ministry of Justice. Is that something that the index takes into a serious consideration, cases like that?
It should not be like that. The index is about perception of the country, and the data are collected for past between year and a half and 2 years. So through this, the effect of, let's say, actual scandals among the countries should be limited to very minimum. So it's more about, let's say, general approach and general perception, not single cases.
When we speak about the general perception, we now have the government led by Mr. Babiš, the ANO party leader, who had been prime minister before. And obviously, there are arguments about his property. He's a billionaire. There are questions about whether he really kind of cut himself off of his companies or not. Does his case and do these discussions, to put it mildly, have any impact on the index?
We can't say right now because the current government is not part of the current CPI index. I suppose we will see that in next version of the CPI next year, or more, let's say, strongly and robustly in 2 years. Because, as I said, the data's collected for past 2 years, so it sort of takes some time to have all these things to take properly into account.
Right. As we mentioned, Czechia has managed to change things when it comes to corruption since the 1990s. From my own personal experience, I remember the 1990s. For example, the police, I think, behaving in a much more professional way these days. What would you say were the areas where Czechia made most progress?
It's actually plenty of areas. First, there is more trust in either police or judiciary system, that the system would actually act independently with confidence, and there would be no allegation of problematic behavior. On the other hand, the trust that politicians would not misuse their position or their power for personal gain remains on extremely low level. I would say or if we do look into the data, the level of distrust within Czech Republic is on the same level as within non-democratic countries or anocratic countries. So there's a huge space for improvement. Of course, there are plenty of new legislation we adopted in the past 30 years, which definitely improves the situation. But as I said earlier, as there is a lack of, let's say, long-term strategy, it's sort of hard to improve all the law and the whole system, I would say, in proper order. So yeah, still there's a big room for improvement.
How important in this respect do you think is the kind of role of education in general, for population in general, for people to know, to understand the problems, to demand that the politicians do something about it?
Based on the CPI data, the education does not play a huge role. On the other hand, it is not the only research Transparency International is doing, let's say, around corruption. The research I do have now in my mind is research we called Corruption Barometer, which is basically a research of Vox Populi on how the common people actually perceive corruption within respected countries. The data collected for Czech Republic for the last time was in COVID times in 2020. And we do see that the the perception of corruption among Czech people is, it looks like we still, in our minds, belong to the Eastern countries, to post-Soviet countries, rather than well-developed Western countries. It is much more convenient for Czechs, for example, to accept or to give very small bribes, for example, to the doctors or to the officers when or during the, let's say, little processes, everyday processes we need to do with the officials. So this sort of perception and behavior is still there, or as far as we know, and this is where the education can actually took place. On the other hand, the education won't solve this sort of thinking in 2 or 3 years. It's long time run, but the sooner we start, the sooner it will be over with.
Just to sum it up, how would you kind of summarize where Czechia is when it comes to corruption? And looking ahead, I would like to know, what developments do you expect, if you expect something in this respect in Czechia?
We do expect development, definitely. Based on the CPI, from what we see from the data, we are not sure whether the improvement we had compared to the last year is caused because of the, let's say, general trust of mostly businessmen to personal integrity of the public officials, politicians. But we do not see whether this trust is, let's say, general, or whether it is trust only among or towards very specific, for example, group of politicians or group of top officials. I do expect that we will see how it goes in next CPI, which will be published next year. And I also expect that the current government will very strongly possibly erode the general trust towards politicians and their personal integrity, because we see from the data not published by Transparency International but by any other researchers, that this general trust is eroding in past few months. So I have a strong suspicion that the situation in Czech Republic is get worse.
Oh, that's not very optimistic. I know I said last question, but as I was asking you, I mean, to kind of sum it up, would it be fair to say, okay, Czechia is right in the middle, it's doing better than, say, Slovakia and Poland, but it's still doing worse than Austria and Germany? Kind of stuck in the middle, right?
Yes, and we are stuck in here for quite some time. The situation is getting better very slightly. And if we want to be perceived as a state in actively fighting corruption, we need to get much, much better.
So that was Marek Chromý from the Czech chapter of Transparency International, looking beyond the rankings and helping us put Czechia's place in the Global Corruption Index into perspective. If you found this episode useful, you can follow Czechast on your podcast platform of choice. And if you think others might enjoy it too, please share it with friends and colleagues. You'll find this episode and many more stories about Czech society, history, politics and culture also at radio.cz. Thank you for listening. I'm Vít Pohanka. Till next time, stay safe, stay healthy, stay curious. And as we say in Czech, naslyšenou.
Czechast, a podcast in English about all things Czech. Whether you're an English-speaking expat living in Czechia and Slovakia, or a descendant of the Czechs, Moravians and Slovaks who left for a better life in America, Australia, Britain or Canada so long ago that you don't speak the language of the old country, this podcast in English is for you.